Hello and welcome to Esther's Gardening Adventures. I'm Esther, and today I'm going to give you some beginner tips for saving seeds. So I've been saving seeds for about 4 years now from both flowers and vegetables, and so I have a good amount of experience in sort of figuring out sort of the do's and don'ts and key tips and terms you need to know. So the reason I started saving seeds was because I wanted to know that I could actually save my own seeds and not be dependent on the seed supply chain. And this actually became a huge deal during the pandemic because people are having a hard time getting a hold of seeds. And I was so grateful to have already started saving and sort of know the process for it. And the reality is, since then, the cost of seeds and the amount of seeds you get per packet, it used to be that you could get a pack of seeds for $3, $2, they would have 50 seeds in them. Now you're lucky if there's 15 to 25 seeds in them for the same varieties for the same price. So saving seeds can save you money, although I certainly buy way more seeds than I save varieties of. It can also be a good way to improve the hardiness of your garden. If you save the best seeds from the best performing plants in your garden, then the ability of future generations to perform well in your conditions increase. So that's another reason why it's good to save seeds. All right, so let's get into, there's 3 basic groups of terms that I need to define for you. Let's start off with the very basics, and I apologize if this is a little too 101, but I think it's important to understand the fundamentals of plant fertilization. So the term is pollination, as well as within that self-pollination and cross-pollination. So let's start off with pollination. Pollination by itself refers to basically the transfer of pollen, which is the male part of the plant, to the pistils or the female part of the plant to fertilize it, right? So self-pollination refers to either the pollen being transferred to the female part of the plant within the same flower of the flowering plant, right? Or within the same plant. So it falls somewhere between the plant, on the flowers on that plant. Cross-pollination, although it has a negative context in the gardening seed saving world, cross-pollination is actually very important. There are a lot of plants that depend on cross-pollination from bees and other things, and birds and butterflies and even ants, right? And the wind. So cross-pollination refers to simply the transfer of pollen from one plant to another plant flower, not on the same basically stem or set of the same plant, right? Cross-pollination is problematic when it's not to another plant of the same variety. So cross-pollination in terms of seed saving, when it's problematic, which is what we're going to refer to here. So when I refer to cross-pollination, it's going to actually be across species, across varieties of crops. So let's say a Persian cucumber and a straight-eight cucumber are combined. The pollen from one is somehow transferred to the other, probably by a bee or butterfly. Well, then the seeds you save from that plant will not be either a Persian or a straight-eight. It'll be some cross between the two genetics of those plants. And that's why self-pollinated plants are the best ones to save some from. So self-pollinated plants have a reduced chance, although no guarantee, because bees can still frequent tomato flowers, right? But self-pollinated plants include like tomatoes, beans. Some beans actually pollinate before the flowers bloom. Tomatoes, beans, peppers, eggplants, and beets too, I read, are self-pollinating. That's less important if you're not going to be eating it, right? If you plan on eating it, knowing that it's not been cross-pollinated with another variety is important. All right, so that's one thing to understand, cross-pollination versus self-pollination, and why saving from self-pollinating plants is good. You can save from a cross-pollinating plant, just the chances of that variety staying true to type in the next generation of seeds is reduced, right? And here's an important caveat that can be confusing sometimes. When you grow a plant, let's say a cucumber plant, again, let's stick with the same category here. All of the cucumbers that grow on a Persian cucumber plant are going to be Persian cucumbers. That plant has a determined genetics. It is the seeds you save from that plant for the next generation of plant you grow that'll be different. So for almost all plants you could possibly ever grow and save seeds from, the plant itself, once it is growing, once it is sprouted and is starting to produce fruit, will stay true to its type for that entire life of that plant. It's the next generation of the genetics. The one exception, and I learned this year, I'm still learning things, right? The one exception is for corn. Because you are eating the seed of the corn, the kernel of the corn, cross-pollination is a bigger issue. So you can actually end up with corn heads that are different than the seed you planted. So that's the one variety of plant where cross-pollination is going to be problematic for the first crop you grow. All right. Next set of terms that are really important for knowing for seed saving, which is open pollinated or heirloom, hybrid, or GMO. Those are 3 types of seed categories. Okay, so let's start off with GMO, just get that out of the way. GMO, genetically modified organisms, can only be bought, GMO seeds can only be bought by commercial farmers from the seed selling companies. And you have to, if you're a farmer and you're growing GMO corn or some other thing, you have to sign a contract with that supplier, and the seeds are very expensive. You have to sign a contract saying you will not save seeds from the crop that you grow. You have to buy fresh seeds every year from them. And it's very, like I said, it's very expensive. It's under a contract. There is absolutely zero chance that you could accidentally end up with GMO seeds to grow in your private garden. So if you see a seed packet that says non-GMO seeds, well, that's a marketing gimmick because you really can't buy GMO seeds. All right, we have that out of the way. So the ones you really need to be concerned about are you growing something that's open pollinated or heirloom, which is the same thing basically. And that means open pollinated and heirloom is something you want because the genetics of those varieties are pretty much locked down. While they can be cross-pollinated, the chances of when you save a seed of it being the same plant in the next generation and tasting the same and looking the same and growing the same is much higher than if you're growing something that is hybrid. Okay, so hybrid basically refers to when 2 or more plant genetics have been combined for a particular purpose. For example, I buy my tomato seeds, I buy some hybrid tomato seeds. There's nothing wrong with them, unlike GMOs, which have a bad reputation. Hybrid just means they've been cross-pollinated on purpose for particular reasons. So I tend to buy this year and last year, I bought seeds that were hybrid, and hybrid typically has like an F1 or F2 number next to it, but the packet will clearly say hybrid on it, so keep an eye out for that. And I buy them because the University of Hawaii came up with some seed varieties that can handle high humidity and high heat temperatures at the same time. And for my area, tomatoes don't do well with high moisture and high heat. They get diseases. They're really, it's problematic for the crops. They die quickly. So a hybrid in that case is valuable to me. So don't discount them automatically. If you're having a real disease problem or a production problem, hybrids can help you, but you just don't want to save seeds from them because the next generation will have some kind of weird variety, will have some of the traits from the prior plants, but not produce the same. For example, they might be bitter, the texture might be weird, it might have a thicker skin, like you don't know. For hybrids, you just don't want to save the seeds from them. You will get something growing, it won't be what you grew the last year. Okay. Before I take you inside, there's one last set of terms to talk about, and this is wet fruited or dry fruited seeds, plants. So wet fruited basically means something like a tomato, where the seeds are encapsulated inside the flesh, where there's moisture. And for wet fruited things like tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, peppers, those are the ones we're going to be covering today anyway. Wet fruited plants, generally you can save them. The seeds will be mature enough to save when they're ready to eat, or a little bit after they're ready to eat. The one exception is cucumbers. Cucumbers, basically, you got to let the fruit bloat up till it's a big yellow squash looking thing for cucumbers before the seeds are ripe. But generally, for most wet fruited varieties, you can save the seeds from the plant once it is fully ripe. Now remember, for peppers, that usually means that they've turned red. Almost all peppers turn red in the end. So even for bell peppers, green bell peppers, you want to wait until they turn red, or sometimes even a purple brown, before you start saving the seeds, and you want the flesh to be a little bit softer. One quick note about saving pepper seeds. The genes in peppers that are hot are dominant genes. So if you save seeds from mild pepper seeds, but they're grown next to hot peppers, there is a chance that the next generation of seeds of those mild peppers will be hot. I've had friends who have had that happen. For example, they grew, I think, Jimmy Nardello peppers and fish peppers next to each other and ended up with like some really spicy Jimmy Nardello peppers the next year. So that's something to be aware of with peppers in particular. Although for most part, for me, they've all ended up sweet the next generation. It doesn't happen that often, but it can happen. Now, dry fruited plants or dry seeded plants, varieties and crops, are things like beans, legumes, peas, things that dry in a pod. So I'm going to open these later on to show you, but these are edamame or soybeans I saved. And if you listen, hear that rattle? that means that the beans have dried up inside and have shrunk and are ready to be harvested. With dry fruited vegetables, you want to save the seeds once the pods are fully dry. And you can leave them on the vine like this. I just pulled it out and sat it at home and let them fully dry before I save the seeds. These are much easier to tell when they're ready because when the pod's dry, and they're cracked and you can hear them moving around inside, they're ready to save. All right. And lastly, before I go inside, there's 2 tips that I'd like to give. Only save seeds from healthy, non-diseased plants. Save it from the best of the best because the genetics of diseased plants can pass through from generation to generation, and you don't want to have a diseased plant the next generation. And if you can, try to save seeds from at least 2 plants or more because keeping up that genetic pool and diversity, the biodiversity of those genes will help you have longer term healthy, more resilient plants. Now, if you only have 1 plant that's good and you want to save seeds for the next year, save it from the 1 plant, that's okay. But if you can, save from at least 2 plants and try. All right. When you're saving seeds from a flower, now we've had our first frost, so I'm not going to save seeds from these flowers, but imagine that we hadn't had a frost. You wouldn't want to save seeds from this flower because it's still fresh, young flower. You want to wait until it's starting to lose some of its petals, it's drying up, the petals are crispy. If we hadn't just had a frost, I would say this would be like the perfect way to save a flower head. Even if it's got a little bit of color to it, as long as it's starting to dry up, it's usually okay to save and take inside and let it finish drying. For example, with marigolds, I wouldn't want to pick a flower at this stage and try to save the seeds from it. The seeds just wouldn't be mature. But if I look around, I can see some flower heads. Let's see, here's one that's starting to dry up. That might be early enough to save. But even further along, let's find one that's fully dried up. Here we go. See how dried up that one is? That's a good one to save. And you would still take it inside and let it dry up. But look, you got some viable seeds there. See, here's another one. So once the seeds have started drying on it, once the petals have started drying up, like this one, the seeds could be saved from that. Get the idea? And of course, some flowers produce pods, like milkweed. And in that case, you want to save the seeds from the pod right before it opens. Or of course, you can also collect them once they start releasing their flowers. Once they start releasing their little seeds into the air. All right, let's go inside and I'll show you my seed saving setup. Here is my seed drying station of sorts. So when you do save seeds, you have a number of ways you can save them. You can put them on a paper towel. You can kind of, if they're mostly dry already, you can put them in a bowl. The most important thing is to make sure to keep a label next to them. Okay, over here we have different types of edamame beans, which I'll talk about in a minute. We have my pepper saving station. These are shishito peppers. These are some jalapeno seeds that were like no heat on their own. These are Sharpei peppers, which I'm going to show you how I do that in a minute. These are Thunder Mountain peppers, which I save these for crushed peppers as well as for the seeds. So I need to take the seeds out of some of these before I make crushed red pepper flakes. And then up here, I have some jars of flowers that I saved. And because I had sort of collected them in a bag, I just put the bag at the top of the jar. So this is bright orange marigolds. And I have them here as sort of a placeholder until I can go through the plant and pull the seeds out of them to let them finish drying, because you want your flower buds to dry out as much as possible before you start pulling the seeds out and sort of processing them to keep. You can also just save the whole flower once it's fully dry for the next year if you want. See, this is white marigold. This is zinnia. And sometimes for zinnias, like there's a particular trait or color I like. So like this is bright orange, almost pink. You can kind of almost see the color still on this. Zinnia that I'm just going to save as that. I have found with zinnias quite often, if you save a particular color, it'll usually stay that color for the next generation. It's not a guaranteed. There's an increased likelihood. We're also going to look at some bronze fennel to talk about how to save seeds from herbs. All right, so let me pull some of these things. This is my Christmas lima beans. These are Good Mother Stallard beans that I grew for the first time this year. I never ended up eating any, actually. This is just the first generation. All right, so let's take some to the living room for me to show you kind of what I do. So here's 3 kinds of edamame or soybean seeds that I've saved. So this is the Kuri brown seeded edamame. And you can see they're all kind of about the same color, almost like a lentil kind of color. Then we have the black seeded or the Tankuru soybeans. And then we have the Midori giant yellow seeded soybeans. So I don't remember which variety this is, but we're going to open it up and figure out where it belongs. Saving seeds from a bean pod is they tend to be, when you want to save the pod, it tends to already starting to be hardened, so don't save them when they're super fresh. You want the bean to be developed and sort of bloated in the pod before you pull it to dry. If the pod is not fully developed, then the bean won't be viable. But if it's the end of the season. So upon opening this, these are all Midori giant edamame, and look how small they are in the space itself. Almost all soybeans are green when they're fresh. I found the brown seeded ones tended to have a little bit of a darker hue to it, a darker green to it, but generally they all kind of looked green when you did it. So now I know that all of these are going to be the Midori giant seeds, so that makes it easier. And the nice thing with fully done pods is like just a barest pressure and they pop right open. I'm barely putting any pressure and it just pops open on its own. Of course, you don't want to save any seeds that look bad or unhealthy, that are moldy. Now you could eat these as dried. You could I just dropped a seed. You could rehydrate them and eat them. That's the nice thing with beans is you don't have to just regrow them the next year. But yeah. Now these feel like maybe this one might be diseased. Yeah, okay. See how that's kind of a green, not fully dry bean. This is nice because I'm not going to save these because they're not fully mature. But look how you can still see there's some green on this. It's kind of the color they are, although they're much bigger when they're in a fresh state. Now, I don't typically save tomato seeds anymore because of the diseased issues, but I will show you real quick for tomatoes what I tend to do. So in this case, it's already starting to kind of go bad a little bit, but you want it to be a little bit soft. This is a cherry tomato. And you have a couple different options with a tomato. My mom has for a long time held to the rule of just getting a paper towel out and opening up the tomato plant. In this case, you can just squish it and the seeds will come right out. She saved tomatoes from, so you could just take like a paper towel and just take the seeds and just spread them out on the paper towel. Try to spread them far enough apart that they can dry and they're not on top of each other. You could even potentially put out a second paper towel to dab the moisture away. But you could do it like that, let it dry, make sure to label it. And then once they're fully dry, you just take them off the paper towels and put them in a baggie. Make sure you label it again. So that's one thing. With a wet fruited plant, you want to take the seeds out and let them dry fully on a plate, on something else, unlike beans, which are kind of already dry. By the time you harvest them, they're basically ready to pack up. So there's tomatoes. Now, something I heard once from a YouTuber, Jessica from Roots and Refuge, that I really liked was she said, you know, if you let the plant mature, it'll show you where the seeds are. And I think that's especially true for flowers and for herbs. So this is celosia or coxcomb that I saved. And this was literally just in a vase from flowers that I had in arrangement for my garden. But look, if I shake it, the seeds come out. Look at all those little seeds coming out. These are all celosia seeds, and they're all viable because they come out on their own accord. And you can see that they normally are in these little pods here, but they will break out of it when they are mature enough to be saved, and they'll come out like this. So I could literally just put all these little black seeds in a baggie. We'd be good to go. Literally, these seeds are everywhere in my house because I do a lot of flower arrangements with them. But that's an easy one. With zinnias, you want to save, and I did a video on this specifically, but you want to save the seeds that are fully viable. And in this case, if you look here, if you look really close, you can see that each petal has a seed at the end of it. And one reason you let it dry in the flower head is because it gives them time to fully develop and mature. And when you pull them out, that one's not very good. You can see which ones are really good genetically or not. And the ones towards the center tend to be less so. But the ones on the edge tend to mature first. Okay. So here's a good example. This flower seed, look how bendy that is. That is not a viable seed. You want it to have some thickness to it, to not be bendy. In this case, I could force bend, but I can't bend that seed very well, and I can kind of feel the thickness of it. So I know this is a safe seed to save. Now you don't have to save the petal on it. You could just take the petal off. That's a seed in itself for zinnias. Let's turn to something like an herb. This is bronze fennel that I saved. This is bronze fennel seeds that I saved. And literally, I just took my hand across it and saved it, but I also brought some of the heads back because I thought it would be fun. I also wanted to save some of the seeds from them, but now I kind of made a big pile of them accidentally. But let's see. Trying to find a set that's fully dried. I think we might get some from this one. So if you just put your fingers between it and grind it like that, the seeds come right out. Look at that. They come right out. And you can kind of tell the difference between the chaff and the seed because the chaff doesn't really have any form to it, like this piece right here. That doesn't really have anything to it, but the seed kind of looks like a seed, right? And here's an easy test for herb and flower seeds, or any seed you save. If you have a packet of a similar variety, pull out the seeds and look at them. Do they look the same? Are they the same color? Are they the same shape? Do they have the same texture? That'll let you know if you're on the right track for saving seeds. But this bronze fennel, oh, it smells so good and it tastes so good. And see how dark these seeds are? These might even be a little too green to save in this case. I think you want them to be more like this darker color that I had saved, which is why I need to let this dry longer. See how dark those are? Although there's some that are a little more greenish. See? And I had labeled it bronze fennel. And that's where my blender cap went. Here we have Shar peppers, Thunder Mountain peppers, and some white marigold flower heads. So Shar peppers are hot and they look like the Shar dog, all wrinkly. And usually with a hot, when I'm getting hot pepper seeds, I would usually use a glove. But in this case, I'm going to be stupid. So you want to, when you're saving pepper seeds, you want to get the seeds out before they rot, before they get moldy in the pepper. In this case, if you don't have time to take them off of the entire pepper, you can just open it up and take the flesh off from around it. Especially if like, oh yeah, there's some heat there. I just licked my finger. Especially if in the case of like the pepper you don't have time to put on gloves or whatever, or you just don't have time to go through the entire thing. You can literally just take off the skin around it and set it out like this and let it dry like that. They will dry faster if you can take them out and separate them on the paper towel. But if you can't, it's okay. I did that with this one, see? And then once it is dried out, you can go like this, right? Look how easy that comes off. It comes off much easier once you've let it dry fully. So that's one tip to make your life easier with peppers. But make sure you open it up so they can dry, because this will rot on the inside and you'll get some nasty moldy seeds that really aren't viable for saving. Let's look at these Thunder Mountain peppers. Now I do not have a little plate to put the seeds on because I had not. And you want to clear your station between each so you don't get your seeds mixed up. Here's Thunder Mountain pepper. Now these peppers have very little flesh to them. They're very thin skinned because they're saved specifically for pepper flakes. But I know there's some pepper seeds in here, so I'm going to try to find them because I need to save some this year for next year. Let's see if we can find some pepper seeds. There we go. There's a few, and they're mostly dry already, which is great. So in this case, I'm just going to go around the plant. I think I see a seed there. Here we go. There's some more seeds there. So you can see that saving seeds. And, you know, I'm always in shock about how much. For hybrids, I understand why they charge so much for seeds, but I'm always in shock of how much vendors charge for seeds when the plants produce each pepper, You know, even one like this, I'm probably going to get 20 seeds just from this one plant. It's kind of crazy to me, just from this one fruit. Let's turn to marigolds. So similar to zinnias for marigolds, and actually we'll show you one more flower, which is calendula. But for marigolds, this flower head is not fully dry. See how it's still got some green to it? So I'm going to leave that in there. But this one is ready to go. Now marigold seeds are similar to zinnia seeds in that they're attached to each petal. And if you just break it open, you can see all these beautiful marigold seeds inside. Look how good those look. They're dark, they're strong, they don't have weird light shading on them. So almost all the seeds I save from this flower head are going to be safe to use and save and share with people. Yeah, this is a really good one. There's a lot in here. See how each petal is attached to a seed? Here's the last set of flowers I'm going to show you, which are calendula and sunflowers. So these are sunflowers that I saved seeds from, and you can see the birds have already started eating the flowers from it. These tiny things, they don't look like sunflower seeds, do they? No, those are just tiny little pieces of the flower. So I'm going to actually take this apart and see if we can find a few sunflowers. So I just need to, there we go. Need to kind of crush it and get them out. And I picked these. One way to know if seeds are ready, especially for flowers where the birds eat the seeds on them, is if you see the birds eating the seeds off of a head or some of the seeds are missing, then most likely that flower head is mature enough to be edible, i.e. therefore it's probably mature enough that the seeds are also mature enough to be saved. And if they're not dark and hard, and so sometimes when I'm watching a TV show, I'll just have a plate for trash and a plate for keeping, and I'll just sort through the seeds during a TV show. There you go. There's a whole bunch of sunflower seeds. Quite easy. I'm going to save this over here so I don't get them mixed up. And we're going to get some calendula seeds. So calendula I can harvest before the seeds are ready, not to save the seeds, but for medicinal purposes. I save these flowers and I put them to make salves. But the seed heads, once they start getting full enough, actually are quite interesting for calendula. They kind of look like claws. See that? There's only a few left on this flower that the birds didn't get or they didn't fall out. But we got a few. There's one. And the reason I knew this is what the seeds look like is because I looked at the seed packet and I said, how do we get that? And then I went and looked at the flower and I said, oh, that's where they are. It's where it curls in. There's a couple smaller ones that were further into it. And that's a big one. That's a seed right there. Isn't that crazy? So they can be, even in the same flower, they can sort of have a different size seeds. Okay, so we've talked about how to identify what seeds to save, what stage to save them at, about hybrid, heirloom, all that stuff. And the last step in saving seeds is to store them. So I store my seeds in these little baggies. You can buy them online, pretty cheap. And I prefer to find the ones that have like a label, like a dark pair that have a white band already in them, so you don't have to put a piece of paper in them or whatever. So in this case, before of course you store your seeds, you want to make sure they are 100% dry, that there's no moisture in them or moisture accidentally added to them, neither to the container you're going to put them in. Now you can store seeds in jars, you can store them in baggies, you can store them in pill bottles, you can store them in paper envelopes, you can hand fold your paper envelopes. For me, looking at the seeds, I like the visual. It helps me know how many are in there, and also I really like how it looks. And they won't go bad in plastic as long as there isn't any moisture presented into the air or into the baggie. So in this case, before I put the beans in, because they're very big, I'm going to write on it. So if I had a bigger portion of these, I would probably not do a baggie. In fact, I don't know if they'll all fit, but so I'm going to put edamame. Okay. And I'm going to put tankaroo. Tankuro. And then I'm going to put the year 2023, the year I saved them. I'm going to put saved so that I know that they were saved by me. And Now, if I was giving them away to somebody, I would also write the location. I would write Maryland and I would write my name on it. But in this case, I'm not planning on giving them away yet, although I probably will end up giving some away. And then you just fill up the bag. Now, if you are trading seeds with anybody, it's nice to give them at least, 15 to 20 seeds or more if you can. But honestly, when I'm trading rare seeds with people, I'm happy just to get 4 to 6 seeds. Because really, all you need is like 4 to 6 seeds to grow some plants and then save your own seeds for the next year, assuming they're not hybrid. All right, let's do this. Too much jabber. Get most of the air out of it. And there you have it, a nice packet of saved seeds. Good to go, good to be saved up. And they'll last for a long time as long as you keep them in a dry, cool, dark-ish location. All right, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and just don't be afraid to save seeds. See how they do. If you're really nervous about whether your seeds are viable or not, and you have a packet of some seeds left over, plant some of the seeds that came from the seller and then some seeds from your own, and that way you're guaranteed to have seeds your first generation of trying. But it's really quite easy once you know the basics and the fundamentals of letting the seeds fully mature, knowing where to look for them. And really, if you can't decide whether a seed looks right or not, look for the seed packet, look up online what the seed looks like, and you can look up other videos. And just be brave and go forward and try it. And thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.